Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the session on positive interviews. I'm Tamsin Kingston, Career Development Advisor here in the Business School, and this is Peter, who is the Career Development Manager here at the Business School. So welcome. I hope you gain a lot out of this evening, and thank you for coming out on what's not a particularly nice night. So this evening we'll be covering the 4 P's of interviewing: preparation, practice, performance and positivity. We'll be giving you some tips on preparation and how to promote your brand. We're going to be teaching you a bit about learning how to think like an interviewer, because then you've got some sort of inside knowledge on how they might be going to treat you in the interview. Some different types of interviews, the different ways that you can be assessed at an interview, and also interviews and recruitment trends. And we will be getting you to do a practical activity during the session as well. So without further ado, I think we'll kick off. So, purpose of the interview, it's not just all about you, it's about the employer as well. So the employer wants to see whether you meet the requirements. They want to get sort of evidence of your skills and ability. You've said all that stuff on your CV and your cover letter, but the proof can sometimes be in the pudding when they've actually got you in front of them. And they're also assessing you for fit within their team. And so they're thinking, okay, is this person going to work well within their team? So there's a whole lot of different things that an employer is looking at. Well, for you, you're wanting to make a great impression, not just a good impression, but a fantastic impression, in fact. You're wanting to persuade them that you meet all the requirements. And it's also your opportunity to find out more about the job and the employer. An interview is a two-way process, and it's probably one of the only chances you're going to get to find out what it's like to be working within that organisation. Research is a great thing, and internet and those sorts of things, but being face-to-face with them is even better. So, different types of interviews. There's the traditional face-to-face, of course. Even more and more now, there's a trend towards telephone interviewing. And one of the really, really important things, if you're going to have your cell phone on there as a contact for telephone interviewing, is to actually listen to your cell phone message. Is that the sort of message that you want to convey to an employer? Because a message like, hello, 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 leave a message, is not going to convey the right message to an employer. So even if it's only during the time that you're trying to be employed, think really seriously about what that message says about you. You might want to change it for that period.
Presume that applies to humorous messages too, that's not a good idea.
Absolutely, yes. You want to come across as a professional person, and think about it. If it was a work cell phone, you wouldn't leave a humorous message or a smart message or a silly message on that, or a message that's just music. You'd leave a professional message on there.
We have had feedback from employers where they've phoned up and they were going to invite someone to an interview, but because of the message on the phone, they just put them in the bin. So they do actually take it really seriously.
There's also an increasing use of video interviewing and Skype, and that could be video interviewing where you record a video message, or it could be using Skype, actually live interaction with them.
With the video, it might be that they ask a series of questions. They might get you to do a presentation. They might get you to do some, I don't know, sell a glass of wine to me, something like that. So there's a lot of different things that they might get you to do online.
And you'd usually have a bit of warning so you could prepare for that, wouldn't you?
Usually we would, yes.
Yeah, but not always?
Not always.
Not always. Don't forget that there might be different numbers of people at that interview too. It might be just one interviewer, or there might be a panel. Sometimes a panel can throw people if they're thinking it's just going to be a one-on-one interview. The most people I've ever had was 5. I knew it was going to happen, but still it was daunting. How about you?
I think probably 5 is my max. I think government departments, hospital boards, they tend to have bigger panels, and if you're going for an academic role, you might expect 9 or 10. Not sure why, but anyone here want to go for an academic role?
Yes, I've known a dean's interview where there was about 50 people, not only for the presentation but also for a Q&A session, which is a kind of interview.
Yeah.
So yes. Yeah. And there could be different levels of formality in the interview as well. Once upon a time, it was usually going to be a really formal process. But now it's not uncommon for people to actually say, let's have a cup of coffee. I've got a job through a coffee interview where there was no formal interview at all. How about you, Peter? Have you?
I've had the coffee, let's just meet for a chat, and it turned into a proper interview, which I wasn't expecting. So even if they do say it's informal, if they say it's for a cup of coffee, expect it to be a formal interview just in case. Prepare like you would for a formal interview. If it is a coffee meeting, I actually think they're the most dangerous type because you can relax too much. Especially if you're getting on really well with the person, you can relax, you can say things that you wouldn't normally say if it was a formal interview, you're in an interview room, so you need to be careful about those informal ones.
And yeah, I fell into that pitfall once. It didn't lose me the opportunity. I went on to a formal interview afterwards, but I thought, and sort of warned as forearmed as far as I've never done that again. Yeah.
With the phone interview, one trick is to smile because it actually makes your voice sound warmer on the phone. And some people actually stand up when they're on the telephone. They seem to think that it helps as well.
Interesting. Yeah. So you might have thought we've covered all types of interviews, but no, there's more. So there's case interviews and case questions, and I'll defer to you, Peter, because I don't know so much about those. Okay,
so case interviews, so if it's a consultancy company, it might just be a case interview, and that's all you get. So you'll get a case, so particular company wants to sell more of a particular brand of ice cream. You're given the information you need, and then throughout the interview you work through that problem. You're thinking out loud. That's the trick with a case interview. So when you've got an interviewer there with you, and they're there to hear what your thought process, and they might actually give you some help as well. So if they say things, you need to listen to what they're actually saying because they might be giving you hints. So it's a particular case. Some consultancy companies, it might be 3 case interviews in a row, even more. So it is really grueling. So that's a lot of the graduates who are going for consultancy companies go through that process. So companies like Bain or LEK. But it's not unusual now for employers in a regular sort of interview to throw in a case question. So it's the same thing. We've got this particular issue, how would you solve it? So they'll give you the information you need and then you work through the process to solve it. But of course it will be sort of like way shorter than the other example I gave. The trick is to, as I said, think out loud. Let them know what your thought process is. It's not necessarily that you come up with the right answer. There might not be a right answer. They just want to know how you think, how you solve problems.
And again, that would be about team fit, organisation fit, won't it?
Yeah. In a lot of cases, it's roles where you'll be client facing. So they want to know that they can put you in front of a client, the client has an issue, you'll be able to sort of talk to them about how to go through and solve it.
There's also lunch, dinner and drinks type interviews, and with those it's all about how you present yourself, how you fit in a social situation, because for certain organisations part of your role may be taking people out, and they want to know that you won't drink to excess, that you will know how to cope with if there's 6 different knives and forks, you won't think, oh my god, panic. So it's all about that, and also during that they may be asking you questions that you require some quite intense thought to answer as well. So it's not all going to be relaxation usually at those sorts of things.
It could just be something basic as you're not the sort of person who drops, the sausage roll pastry on the floor. Just things like that.
Work sample interviews is where they might ask you to show samples of your work, a portfolio you've done, or to demonstrate your skills. For a lecturer, they might ask you to give a short lecture on a topic of your choosing. For a designer, you might have to show design. For someone in IT, you might be able to show them a program that you've designed or an app that you've designed. And a situational interview, that's really sort of setting out a situation and then asking you how you would have handled that situation or what you would have done under a particular set of circumstances. It's similar to behavioural, but it's going to be a hypothetical question. So it can be easier and harder than a behavioural question because you're really having to think on your feet about how you would cope with that.
And that's why they ask it.
Yes, put you under pressure. So online interviews, as we said, there's a lot more online interviews happening now, so it's really wise to be ready for that. Choosing the right location, really, really important. You don't want to be in a cafe with lots of noise in the background. So find yourself a nice, quiet place with good lighting and preferably a plain wall as your backdrop. Might not be possible. And make sure that you're seen on the camera from about the waist up. You don't want them just to be sort of seeing your face. Can't accentuate this enough. Test all the technology. The number of times that people get caught by this because they get into the room 2 minutes beforehand and start to get things set up. The technology's not working and so you can't actually hold the interview. So test the connection, test your camera, test your sound and make sure that you understand how it all works. Do a practice run with a friend beforehand if necessary. And plan for glitches, because sometimes something will go wrong. It's something you can't predict that the connection might go wrong. So have the person's contact details for who's interviewing you, for example, so you can ring them and say, "Look, I'm just think something's not working, and I'm working on it." So they're not sitting on the other end thinking, "Okay, what's going on here?" or that you've forgotten or something like that.
And sometimes things can happen at their end as well.
Yes.
So have a backup so that you can phone them and just do a phone interview if necessary.
Yeah.
Another thing to test is in terms of what you're going to wear, how it looks. So I know someone, he agonised over what tie looked best on the video interview, and he was here in the business school, we were up in the clock tower and we were giving him advice as to which tie looked better.
Because actually with some connections, a tie that's really bright can actually look quite wrong, can't it? Yeah.
And think about what's in the background as well and whether the background is appropriate. If you're doing it at home, pets, family members are not allowed to come into the room when you're actually doing it. That happens.
Yes, and also anything like phones and all those sorts of things. It says turn everything off before the interview starts, except your computer, of course. So anything that might interrupt the interview, and make sure on your computer that there's nothing there. I'm sure you've all heard interviews on the radio where they've had their mails coming through, and so there's this bing, bing, bing all through it, which is really, really disturbing if you're trying to actually concentrate on something like that. Dress professionally. Nothing too flashy, but something that looks right for the organisation. And yeah, look at yourself in the monitor and see how you look. Sometimes you might want to move the computer around a bit so you get your best side and things like that.
Presumably dress depends on the organisation. Some
Absolutely.
startups have a very sort of casual culture. You wouldn't want to wear a business suit to a casual culture organisation.
Yeah, you always need to think about the organisation. Maybe dress a notch above what they would normally wear on a day-to-day basis, because it is an interview. But I have a friend, he went for an interview at the warehouse. It was for an HR role, and he wore his corporate suit, and then the interviewers were wearing warehouse red shirts. And I don't think he didn't get the job because of that, but I think it might have put him off balance because he kept talking about it later. So it affected his performance.
Don't forget to the non-verbals. Even though it might be an online interview, you've still got to meet people's eyes. You've got to do all those non-verbal activities, nodding, smiling, etc. Because you're still trying to engage them. Although it's through a screen, you're still trying to engage them. Look directly at the camera, because sometimes it can, if you're looking like that, or that can muck up your performance as well. Speak in a conversational voice, and by that we don't sound as though you're incredibly stressed. Just speak to them in a relaxed manner, and it's okay to take notes, but while you're being interviewed, don't spend all your time looking down like that, because then it's going to be obvious that you've got extensive notes, and that could put an interviewer off as well. And last but not least, like in an ordinary interview, it's okay to take a second before you answer. I know interviewers that are actually put off by people who, the second they stop the question, are into the answer. So it's then taking just a moment suggests that you're actually thinking about it, rather than having a pre-prepared answer and not having really thought about the question.
And just like sometimes on the phone, you can get that delay, so you need to pause to make sure that they aren't still talking. You know how sometimes you're on an overseas call and you get that horrible delay and you talk over each other? So it's a good idea just to pause, just in case you get that.
And you do often get that with Skype, don't you? Yeah. Okay, one of our big P's, preparation. Now, different people will prepare in different ways, and this is actually a great way of preparing, is thinking about all the things that you need to do and perhaps putting them on a mind map. But if that doesn't work for you, just thinking about all the stages of the interview and what might be useful. So we're going to go a bit further into the old preparation because it's so vital. So the nuts and bolts, ask who are the interviewers, and ask how long the interview will last for. There's nothing worse than going in and thinking it's going to be a half-hour interview and it turns into a 2-hour interview. You've got other things that you should be doing, and you're thinking, oh my God, so-and-so should be picked up from childcare, panic, because that's going to affect your performance. So do that. The who the interviewers are, that can help you too, because you might then adapt your performance depending on who's interviewing you. And where the interview will take place. That may seem really obvious, but and you talked about some interviews being, say, on the 10th floor of a building. If you don't know that it's going to be on the 10th floor of the building, you might not think, 10th floor. There may be a few steps to me getting to the 10th floor, so I'll arrive there 20 minutes before rather than 10 minutes before. So the where is really important.
So some buildings have, you've got to sign in, and that can take time. Often it's on, you've got the silly keyboard and it won't work, and it's I think it's Auckland Council. It took me forever because there was a queue as well. So it just took us forever to get through the process. Hope no one here is from Auckland Council. Oops.
Yes, I've had a similar experience, yes.
Yeah.
And there was this big group of us waiting, and yes, not good.
No. And there are some buildings where, you put in who you're going to see, and then it tells you what elevator to go to, and then you're standing there forever. So there's those sorts of issues. I had an interview once in Great South Road, and I don't know what it is about that road, but I always get lost. So on the weekend I actually drove and figured out where it actually was so that wouldn't happen. And I know someone, she had an interview on Queen Street, and so that's fine, but what she didn't realise, it was Upper Queen Street. So by the time she got there, she was out of breath and quite hot, and she looked it. So it's just silly things like that.
And yes, that
would
really
you recommend a sort of a recce, or sort of go the day before, so the 500 Queen Street is right at the top end, it's not at the Britomani end if you're not familiar with the place?
Yeah, so you could do, Google Maps these days does help a bit, but you could always do a recce if you needed to. As I said, Great South Road, look how long that is, which is probably why I get lost, and there's this weird fork thing as well. But yes, so if you're worried about it, you could do a recce.
But yes, don't totally rely on that recce. I had an interview here at the clock tower and thought, great, there's parking outside, so if I arrive about 15 minutes early, I'll be fine. Only to discover that all the parking outside, all along that street, was closed. And so then I had to go and find another parking building, and I arrived there, flushed of face, slightly out of breath because I'd had to come a sort of a 10-minute walk in about 3 minutes. So even with the recce, I'd still arrive in the area plenty of time beforehand. Yes.
Yeah. A lot of these things they should tell you, but if they don't, ask. And you can ask them what sort of interview it is as well. They may or may not tell you, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
Indeed.
With who the interviewers are, you can actually do some research as well. So you can Google, check on LinkedIn, and it might help you with questions that you can ask in the interview.
Indeed. Now, don't forget that they're going to have looked at is your CV and your application. But they probably are going to ask you questions based around that. So make sure that you know that off by heart. Even have it there with you, and practice talking about the things that you've done and that you've mentioned in there. It's like your work experience and your extracurricular activities, the amazing things that you've done and to succeed in your activities. So really important that you know that well, because that can show up if you're telling a different story that your CV did.
You can take things into the interview with you if you want. A clear file is quite a good idea, because then you can have the most important page on the top. I think I have taken stuff into the interview. I don't think I've ever actually referred to it myself. You've taken stuff into your interview.
Yes, I always take stuff into the interview. The only thing I've ever referred to is questions at the end, I have to say. I've never actually looked at my CV during the interview, but it's nice having it there just in case. Another important thing is really analyse the job description, because by doing that, you're able to actually anticipate the sorts of questions that they might ask, and then prepare examples of how you might answer those questions. And so yes, here is a question around relationship management. So I think, okay, if they're asking how you might demonstrate a high level of interpersonal skills, think about a situation when you've done that. So you're well prepared and you're not on the hop and thinking, oh my God, I can't remember. So really look at that job description, because that's going to give you a lot of clues as to the sort of preparation that you can do for the questions. Also, research the organisation and the job. With the organisation, look at their website, look at industry websites, look at journals, look at the networks that they have. Look at the Herald and those sorts of things. See if there's anything in there that might give you some clues, because that can give you some information on why you want to work at the organisation. It can also give you questions to ask at the end, and just prompt you to think about the organisation as an entirety. And then also look at the industry. What's the future trends? What are their competitors? Because that may also inform you as to whether you want to go into that industry, mightn't it? Because if it's an industry on the downturn, you may think, no, I'd rather have one that's on the upturn.
And it might help you with questions as well. In terms of how you frame your answers, it might help you there, and you can show that you've done your research. But also, if they ask you a question about who do you think our main competitors are, you'll be able to answer.
And then look at the job. What is the job? What will you be doing in that job? Perhaps go on to something like Seek and see what other jobs like that talk about. So get yourself a bit more informed about that. Again, can prompt you to ask questions at the end of the interview if you're not clear about that. And really, this could all help you to answer that question, why do you want this job? So prepare to make a really good first impression about with what you wear, with the handshake, no limp handshakes, a nice firm handshake, but also don't rupture the blood vessels in the person's hand that you're shaking, because I'm sure that we've all had those and gone, afterwards. So don't do that either.
And the problem is you might be nervous, which means you might have damp palms as well. handshakes are just really fraught, really. So don't make it obvious, sort of they come up to you and you're doing that before you shake their hands.
Yes, I know someone who puts a handkerchief in his pocket because he has really sweaty palms. So he has that handkerchief, and just before the interview he always makes sure that he has had his hand in his pocket so it comes out nice and dry. So it's all this preparation.
How many of you like shaking hands? How many don't like shaking hands? Yeah. So if you don't like it, you could wait for the employer to initiate. Chances are they probably will, but you don't have to initiate it if you don't want to. You can always wait. But then you've got the problem of you're watching their hand to see if they're going to put their hand out or not, so you can't win. But not all employers will shake hands, but a lot of them will, I think.
Yeah, I'd say most actually.
Yeah. But if you're comfortable doing it, you can always initiate it yourself.
But yes, while you're doing that, try to also maintain eye contact. As you say, difficult. But maintain that eye contact, and that's right through the whole interview. Make sure that your tone of voice is right. Don't shout, but also don't speak so no one can actually hear what you're saying. So try and get a nice tone of voice. Also, your tone of voice, sometimes you can sound as though you're lecturing people. No one likes to be lectured, so just a more conversational tone is the best. And posture, really important during an interview that you maintain a friendly and approachable posture, but not one that seems too aggressive or too laid back. Because sometimes you can give completely the wrong impression by your posture.
You probably noticed Tamsin and I both talk with our hands. Yeah. When it comes to an interview, mannerisms like that get worse because you're nervous. So I've been in an interview and I've been like a windmill, really. There was one where there was a round table and I was talking about walking down the road and I was actually walking my fingers along the table. That's when I realised I was totally out of control. So because it was a round table, I actually sat on my hands and they couldn't see. But yes, if you've got mannerisms like that, you might sort of play with your earrings if you wear them, or play with your ears, things like that. So just watch those sorts of mannerisms.
Yeah, that's one.
Pen clicking. Yeah, don't hold a clicky pen because that's very easy to do.
Yeah. I actually was in an interview where someone had to stop the person doing that because they were completely unaware that they were doing it. But yes, I have my interview position. I put my hands in my lap like that because yes, otherwise I can get all a bit windmilly. Yes. Okay. One of the crucial bits, but all these bits are crucial, is the good old questions. Open questions. The aim of these is to make sure that you do as much of the talking as possible. That good old chestnut, tell me about yourself. Why have you applied for this role? It's surprising how many people get thrown by those. So make sure that you have those answers prepared. Not that you want to say them by rote, but that you've got them prepared so you feel comfortable about saying them. And they're really difficult if you haven't prepared them. It's an opportunity for you to sell yourself, so use that opportunity. Outline a clear structure for each and identify what your achievements are and offer specific examples to back it up. It's kind of proof that you actually have done what you're talking about. And practice your answers aloud to check your timing, your clarity and your tone of voice. Practice with others. That's really useful because they can say if you struck the right sort of level. Competency-based questions. These can be really tricky too. And examples of those are a time when you anticipated potential problems and developed preventative measures. They're wanting to know more about what you have done and how you have done it. Look at the competencies that they have asked for because they're probably going to ask you questions about that. So again, it's sort of preparing, making yourself feel comfortable about answering those. Choose the most impressive examples that you've got to demonstrate each competency, because you want to shine. You want to be a star in their eyes. So So sometimes you might have to mention a second example of it, but if you've got a couple, first one should be the most impressive one. And yeah, as the video said, use STAR to help you. The structure can help you to answer the question and be clear about each aspect of the question. And yeah, I've also found that a lot of people focus on the situation and the result, but forget about the task and action aspects of it. And if you do that, then the difficulty is that they don't know exactly what you did to make that result.
So probably about 60% of your time should be on that action portion of it. And if it's a team question, our tendency is to say that we did this, we did that, we did the other. And you can say that sometimes, but particularly when it comes to the action, you want to focus on what you did. So it is okay to say, I did this. My contribution to the team was. So it is very easy to just talk about we all the time when it's a team question.
Yeah. And they're not interviewing the team, they're interviewing you. That's the thing to keep in mind, isn't it? So yeah, situation, task, action, result. Really keep those in mind. You don't have to write these down because we'll be sending out the slides to you, so don't worry about that. But yeah, really do think about these when you're structuring your answers and practicing them.
With the result one, if they ask you a negative question, so tell me about a time when you had a poor performing team, what was the problem? What you can do with that is actually talk about what you learnt from the experience. That will be the result, sort of what you learnt and what you would do differently next time.
Okay, now we're going to get you into groups of 3 to actually answer these 3 questions. So tell us a bit about yourself, tell us about a time when you worked successfully in a team, and give us an example of a time when you've studied and worked in circumstances that were unusual or different. Now, it was going to be about 10 minutes, so you will have to be very structured in your answers using STAR. 3 minutes on each question, so each of you will have 1 minute to answer the question. You can get yourself set up at the table if you like, where one of you is sort of in an interviewer type position. But yes, if you can get into groups of 3 and answer these questions, and we'll have about 2 or 3 minutes of discussion at the end on how you felt you went. Okay, if we can wrap the exercise up now, and we're just going to give you a few examples, the sort of things that you could have said, to show you how, if you'd prepared this, how you have succinct statements that actually answer the exact questions. So here we are. Here an example of how to best answer this question for experienced candidates. I've worked hard in my education and career to prepare myself to become a world-class accountant. Received my Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in accounting from the University of Auckland, and then went to work for KPMG after graduation. Passed the CPA exam on my first try and progressed well in my career. Rah, rah, rah. So it's actually succinct, but there's a heck of a lot of information in there, isn't there? And you can see how, if you've prepared that, how much easier it would be than going in and thinking of it on the spot. And sorry,
it's tailored very much for the specific job. You can put in some other information as well. You don't have to keep it strictly sort of professional. If there's something in your personal life, some extracurricular activity, you can put that in there as well. It just depends on what relates to the job. It depends on the organisation and the industry as well.
And again, here's an example of working in a team. You're going to get these slides, so I won't read that out for you, but it really goes through every aspect of what the person has done in a team.
When you're talking about a team, it's important to say how many were in the team. So in this case, it's a team of 8. So if you just talk about team, that could mean anything from 2 of you to, who knows. So you do need to quantify wherever you can, give numbers.
And also your role too.
What your role is. Yeah. And then once again, you've done your research, you know what they're looking for, so then in your answer you can weave that through. Do you want me to talk about this one? Yeah. So what might help you is if you actually know what your role is in a team. We naturally tend to have a particular role. One of them obviously is leader. Even if you're not formally the leader, you might just naturally be inclined that way. Or you might be the summariser, you know, the calm person, the one that summarises and clarifies what's been said in a meeting, for example. You might be the one that makes sure that everyone gets a chance to have a say. You will actually naturally have probably a combination of some of these, and knowing what your tendency is can help you when it comes to answer the team questions.
Indeed.
Employers, a lot of the time, will actually have some sort of marking sheet. Not everyone, and it's more so the larger organisations almost always would. Smaller organisations may or may not, but they'll have some sort of marking criteria, and then that way they'll be able to judge you against the next person, etc. So for this particular question, when you studied, worked in circumstances that for you were unusual or different, what they would be looking for are these sorts of things. They'd be basically giving you a score. It might be from 0 to 5 or 3. So 3, it's strong evidence of each criteria that you've answered it really well, very thoroughly, given examples, quantified. Some criteria, some evidence, maybe 2, and then limited evidence, you might just get a 1. The one thing to remember about this is when you're in the interview and you know how sometimes you feel like, oh no, I really didn't answer that very well. You don't know how important that particular question is. So often they weight these things. So one question might be more important than another question. So you don't want to let if you get the sense that you didn't answer it very well, don't let it put you off, because you don't know how important that particular question was. But it is important, wherever you can, to give this sort of evidence and proof and back up your answers.
And what if you don't know the answer? We've all had those oh my God moments. Don't bluff, don't lie. Take a sip of water. You can ask for the question to be repeated, or ask for clarification, or ask for time to consider the answer. This is part of the testing nature of interviews, because how you respond in a difficult situation is important. Usually by the end of a moment or so, you'll have found some sort of answer within yourself.
Sometimes I'll just ask you a question just to see how you cope. One that was going the rounds a few years ago was why a manhole cover's round.
Okay.
It took an engineering student to give me the actual answer to that, but a lot of people would not know. So it's how you cope with a question that you really don't know the answer to.
Yeah, that would throw me. Yeah.
If it's round, it can't fall through. If it was square, if the hole was square, it could fall through.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. So now you know if you get that one. It's really good to have some questions to ask the interviewer as well. It's your chance to find out more about the role and whether it's the right fit for you. It gives you a chance to demonstrate that you're really interested in the employer, that you've done your research on them, and that you know about the organisation, because that will impress them. So that's really important. You can find out about the interviewer's experiences. So you can ask them, what's a day in the life of the role that you're going for, or something like that. Or you can ask them what their experience is. And also, it gives you an opportunity to ensure that the interviewer doesn't have any reservations about you as an interviewee. And some typical questions you might ask: typical day in the role. Is there an induction and training program? Can you tell me about the team I'll be working with? What do you most enjoy about working here? So all those sorts of things can build up your information on the role, on the team, and on the organisation. And also the last one, what's the next step in the process? Really useful to know that. If they say we'll let you know within a couple of days, then you'll know within a week or so, if you haven't heard from them, that you might want to contact them back. So that you get some knowledge of that those steps in the process. They might also say, well, we'll have a second interview. So then you're prepared if they invite you in for a second interview. Really rather useful for you to send a thank you email after an interview. It's polite, but it gives you a chance to remind them who you are. There might be something in the interview that you thought, oh, that didn't go so well. You can just insert a little bit that you've thought of afterwards into the email. Don't want it to be too long, but it's an opportunity to just sell yourself a little bit more. And it also can remind them that yes, they actually have to get back to the people that they've interviewed, because sometimes in busy organisations they're not so good at that.
A lot of people.
Person's name, should that be by first name or title? Mr. Smith or Joe or John or
Yeah, pass. It depends. It depends on you, it depends on the organisation. As you were saying before, if it's more of a informal type of organisation, you might go with first name. I think if you're not sure, I think it's safest to go formal and go with Dear Mr. Smith. I don't think too many people get upset if you did Dear Mr. Smith, whereas there are some people who would, if you said Dear Joe, they might get upset.
if in doubt, you're on the consent.
If in doubt, I would, yeah. But it depends on your age, it depends on the age of the interviewers, but you might not know. If you got my mother and you said, Dear Noreen, she would throw you in the bin. A lot of throwing around in the bin at the moment. So you just don't know. So yeah, I would err on the side of conservative.
Sometimes if you've met that person several times,
Yeah.
then that might make you think, we've actually established a relationship, so it would be okay. But I'd also err on the side of conservatism, because there are a lot of conservative employers out there. So yeah, practice and preparation makes perfect. It's a skill that you can develop. Really important that you research the role in the organisation, analyse the job description, think of examples. Practice, 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 practice. And after the interview, reflect on how it went. What did you do well? What could you have done better? Now, one of our questions was with regard to feedback and whether it's okay to ask for feedback. Yes, it's fine to ask for feedback. You can do that in a follow-up email, or when they call you or email you to say that you haven't been chosen. You can do that in that. Sometimes they won't give you feedback, but sometimes they'll give you quite good feedback, and it's then you can actually utilise that feedback in your preparation for the future. Now, we had a few other questions that had come up. And one was, are older applicants at a disadvantage when they've got a younger interviewer? We were discussing that, and our perception is perhaps that might have been the case in the past, but now there are more and more older applicants choosing to work longer, and there is a diminishing pool of younger applicants. Then I don't think that would be the case. I think that people will treat you on at face value. One really, really tricky question is how to cope with constant rejection. And it's going to happen. I don't know anyone who applied and got the first job that they applied for. Do you? No. Everyone gets rejection letters. You might get 50, you might get 100. You might have applied for a job, or it's like the internships that come up, where there might be 5,000 applicants for those internships. So awful lot of those people are going to be rejected, and it's how you actually manage that rejection. One way is to realise that it's not personal, that there is just someone who is a better fit for the organisation. One is to get that feedback and work on areas of weakness. One's to look at what stage the rejection was. So, was it at interview, or did you not even get to the interview? Because if you didn't get to the interview, perhaps it's the CV, the cover letter, or the application that might be the issue.
I got feedback that they screen a job application on Seek. They screen at a rate of about 20 to 30 seconds a CV.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I've heard 10 seconds.
It's actually quicker.
A really short time.
It is actually quicker, yeah.
I mean, I've been working on a hit rate of about 1 in 15 of getting a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Or a phone interview is about right. So,
Mm-hmm.
it
Yeah.
pans out.
Yeah.
It obviously depends what you do, but about 1 in 15 just to get a,
For you is okay.
to get a
Yeah.
phone interview.
Bear in mind also, I think in many cases, there will be internal applicants. Some firms, their rules say
Oh,
they
yeah.
must
Exactly.
they must advertise the position. In many cases, they'll have someone lined up for the job, unless an outside applicant really is a great, a much better fit. 9 times out of 10, they're just going through the motions.
Yeah, normally that comes out of the vague and
Public service, for example.
vague and ambiguous job ad. It's like, well, what you guys want?
Might be,
This,
yeah.
This blue chip organisation is looking for someone that relishes a challenge, etc., 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 etc.
Who's going to
What
say
the
no to
hell
that
do you guys
question?
want?
One clue might be that if it's only on for a short period of time, so like 5 days, that might be a clue that they've got an internal applicant as well. If you target your applications, so rather than do a scattergun and apply to a whole lot of different organisations, if you actually do the research and target it and think about who you're applying and tailor every single application, that should increase your hit
Where
rate.
you're getting your hits.
Yeah, exactly. So be a bit strategic. Yeah. Going back to the older applicant question, we have had sort of feedback from, because of course we deal with graduates. We have had feedback from employers that they are getting more older people sort of applying for, say, a graduate position and going through a grad program, and they don't have a problem with that. Sometimes the applicant themselves can feel a little bit uncomfortable if they're with a whole lot of younger people in the grad program, so that might be an issue, but from the employer's point of view, they find older applicants do actually have a lot to offer in terms of value. So that was good feedback to hear.
Yes, and I read an article about even internships. People are doing career changes, and so they may do an internship at 40 or 50, yeah.
So I think it is a growing trend. Another question was, how do I prepare for an interview? The job's in a different industry. So that's doing the research, that's doing informational interviews, talking to people in that industry and getting feedback and information from them.
It's all about preparation again, isn't it?
It's all about
Yes.
preparation, yeah.
Okay, and to wrap up, other things that you should know is that about 25% of employers get back to candidates within a week, but 44 never respond at all, so you will never hear from them. Allow up to about 2 weeks and then follow up. Or you may choose to decide that an organisation that doesn't get back to you is not one that you want to work for at all. But sometimes I've been in the situation where I've had to follow up referees, and it has taken me a long time to do that. So sometimes the organisation may just be going through different processes and it may take them a while.
Yeah. This is probably a trend in terms of you never hearing about your application at all, ever. It's probably a trend I've noticed in the last 3
3 to 5 years?
Yeah, 3 to 5 years.
Some recruiting firms are notorious for that. They just don't let you know. If they don't tell you, they're not going to let you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, follow up. Yeah.
But yeah, you can follow up, sort of just leave maybe a couple of weeks and then contact them. You're able to do that. And it shows interest as well from your side, so don't worry about doing that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Employment Relations website, but it's got a lot of really useful information in there about job contracts, about your employment rights. So it's actually a really good website to sort of check some of this stuff out.
And don't forget, you can refuse a job offer. If during the interview process you have interviewed them and you've decided that they are not for you, it's okay to say thanks, but I've decided that you don't have to really say why you've decided. You can just say thanks, but I've decided not to take up this opportunity. That's perfectly okay as well.
So conscious that we've gone over time, sorry about that. But that is actually the end of the presentation, unless you've got some more questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.